Center, Yale University. Her book, Jumbos and Jumping Devils, A Social History of Indian Circus, was published by the Oxford University Press in 2020. Dr. Nisha holds a PhD degree from our Department of History, University of Delhi. She has been a Mellon SSRC Trans-Regional Research Fellow with Center for Indian Studies in Africa, University of the Witwatersrand, Johannesburg, and a Writing Fellow with Johannesburg Institute for Advanced Study in South Africa. Her monograph, The Jumping Devils, A Tale of Circus Bodies, has been published in the Nehru Memorial Museum and Library Occasional Paper Series. Her writings have appeared, amongst others, in the Indian Economic and Social History Review, Economic and Political Weekly, Conservation and Society, Indian Journal of Gender Studies, and the Social Science Province. She has been awarded the Swedish South Asia Studies Network Fellowship in Lund University, Sweden, Charles Wallace India Trust Research Grant, UK, Indian Council of Historical Research Junior Research Fellowship, New Delhi, and the Papia Ghosh Memorial Trust PhD Fellowship from Center for Studies in Social Sciences, Calcutta. Presently, she is also co-editing with Professor Dilip Menon a collection of essays based on the international conference, Circus Histories and Theories, which she had organized at the Center for Indian Studies in Africa in 2018. Now, I request Dr. Arpana Balachandran to take over as she will be chairing the talk today. Over to Dr. Arpana.
Just checking if my mic is on. So welcome, Nisha. We're really looking forward to hearing you speak. I think the format is that you have about 45 minutes to an hour to speak, and you can speak at length. And then we take questions, both from within the Google Meet, as well as from outside, from Facebook, etc. Our students will bring the questions in if we have the time. So I'm looking forward to what I'm sure will be a fantastic talk. So, glad to have you here. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you, Aparna. That was, it's amazing to join History Department, Delhi University, which I consider my alma mater. Thank you so much for the invitation. And Dr. Razi, who invited me, it's really sweet of you to invite me over. Frankly, this is a much awaited invitation. I think the last time I spoke in the department was 10 years ago when you organized the Research Scholars Conference with another person. Thank you so much. And thank you for the introduction as well, Soumya. And Seema, it's nice to join with you here after the small chat that we had in South Africa. Thank you very much once again. Actually, my association with the History Department, Delhi University, began in 2008 as a PhD student. The years I spent with Delhi University actually was one of the most vibrant academic period in my life, I should say. I could make friends for a lifetime. Delhi became a second home. Of course, I've crossed hills and rivers in this journey. But here I am with this beautiful book. Doesn't necessarily have to be beautiful to you. Anyway, the book is here, Jumbos and Jumping Devils, Social History of Indian Circus, which came out in June 2020 last year. Actually, when I began my research in my hometown in Thalasheri, North Malabar, I barely had any idea that my work would lead me to a whole world of circus and circus acrobatics in South Asia. However, my work has taken me further to doing research, not just across India, but further in East Africa, Europe, and America now. exploring the circus connections and their connected transnational histories, not just in terms of humans, but also in terms of animals, objects, and ideologies. Circus in the subcontinent opens up a lot of larger questions for me. It's embedded in the arrival of the modern, the remaking of caste and gender hierarchies, transforming of physical cultures, bodies, and performances, the interventions of colonial and post-colonial states on nature, humans, and animals, and also the development of various technologies, whether local or modern or indigenous technologies. The expansion of itinerant entertainment is another unexplored area that might again open up a lot of inquiries. I mean, the circus might open up questions regarding the emergence of itinerant entertainment. Another major area is transnational and transregional histories, which actually would raise the questions of global connections. In my book, what I've tried to do is to look at certain key moments and aspects from the history of the circus in India, spanning over a century and a half. And in doing so, I've deliberately stopped myself from writing a history of fathers and furs, a chronological history of fathers and furs. I remember this accidental rendezvous with a senior scholar in his late 70s in the Nehru Memorial Museum and library in the initial stages of my research. I met him in Kuti's canteen at NMML. And this veteran scholar opened his conversation with a small chat on the photo exhibition that was going on in the Nehru Memorial Museum at that time, criticizing Nehru as a statesman. So then he asked, what is my research on? So he felt that it's a wonderful research. He also believed that it's definitely an area that needs research. But then he shot the crucial query: in what ways do the research on circus enrich knowledge? How will the society benefit at large? In fact, these reservations were not unfamiliar to me. I have received various kinds of responses concerning research on the histories of the circus from people within and outside the academic community. Most of the responses from the community outside academics, or when I told them that my research is on the history of the circus, they would be like, why don't you choose something for something serious for a doctoral study with a wry grin? And the responses from the peer group has been mostly like, what a wonderful subject, but is there any circus left now? Some of them even expressed doubts regarding the extent of its past, conveniently forgetting that cinema also only have that much of history. But on the other hand, the responses from the circus community has been entirely different. Majority of them were very happy to share their research with me. Memories with me, memories and memorabilia with me. Even when they quite did not understand the kind of research that I was doing, like some thought that I'm a journalist. Some others thought probably I'm a representative of a government survey or something. But the history of circus is more or less a history through their memories and memorabilia. It was as if they've created an archive of their own and diaries, aided with pulsating memories, constitute this archive hitherto unexplored. However, I have divided my book into 4 major chapters: introduction and coda, a small epilogue. The major part of my book deals with human acrobats and human history. I have devoted 2 of my chapters exclusively on animals and the history of objects in the circus. My first chapter, Performing Bodies and Physical Cultures, looks into the history of circus acrobatics. Various physical cultures like Kalaripayattu, Sando system, Kusti, yoga, Swedish drill, and gymnastics have contributed to the structure of circus acrobatics. Can I have slide 1 and 2?
Sure, ma'am. Just a second.
Okay. Okay, so I hope that the slide is working. Otherwise, we can deal with it later.
It is working.
Okay.
Is it there?
Okay. 2 will do. 2 is, yeah, I think, yeah. Slide 2. Okay.
Aditi, you'll have to move the slide to the next one.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Slide 2, actually. Slide 2 is actually the only existing circus gallery in Talasheri, in the Talasheri town. Circus galleries undeniably played a role in laying the ground for circus acrobatics in India, training the early circus acrobats of North Malabar in the Kerala state. These training institutes, housed in permanent structures, unlike a circus, open up key questions regarding culture, body, gender, and caste. Along with other traditional forms such as Kathakali and Theyyam, Kalaripayattu has also been written about extensively within and outside academia in India and abroad. Some prominent writers have mentioned in passing about the obvious links between Kalaripayattu and the development of circus acrobatics in Malabar. For example, Philip Zerilli's amazing work, When Body Becomes All Eyes, he mentions the influence of Kalaripayattu in training the early generation of circus artists in the region. Interestingly, none of these scholars mention the few circus galleries that came into existence in the Talasheri-Kannur regions in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It could probably be because circus galleries are not seen as integral to tradition, as other arts or physical cultures like Kalaripayattu or Kathakali or Theyyam. So despite being an amazing space of physical strength, skill, and display, the Kalaripayattu admirers seems to have paid no attention to the circus galleries that produced most of the renowned circus acrobats from Malabar who ruled over the Thames for across borders, actually, in the first part of the 20th century. Slide 3. Okay. This is Kileri Kunyikannan teacher. The first gallery was built by Kileri Kunyikannan, whom the circus community respects as the guru and father of circus acrobatics. I'm speaking about a Malabar of 19th and 20th centuries, ridden with caste purity notions and distancing that extended to visibility, touch, hearing, and clearly specified distances. Kileri's conversion of the traditional pied Kaldi into a circus gallery, where all castes were welcome, but at the same time, the pied Kaldi is a system where caste and its embedded notions of purity are dominated in many ways. And his conversion of this pied Kaldi into a circus gallery where all castes and genders and ethnicities were welcome was one of the most significant moments of that era. It should also be noted that this is it's a physically intimate space. Kalari is a physically intimate space where different kinds of caste bodies and genders come in close proximity. But this does not figure in any colonial, nationalist, or subaltern historical narratives of resistance or reform in Malabar. Actually, for these training centers, many men and women belonging to different castes got trained in acrobatics and crossed borders to join European, Australian, and as well as American circuses. The next slide actually is you can actually see the 1935 postcard from Hagenbeck Palace Circus, German circus. This is Kannan Bombayo with his Italian wife, Mary. Kannan Bombayo got trained in the circus gallery at the age of 7 and joined Bertram Mill Circus, the British Bertram Mill Circus at the age of 22. And he has also worked in the Ringling Brothers and other most well-known circuses abroad. It is said that Kannan's performance was watched by Adolf Hitler, and Kannan's performance on his popular item known as rope dance. He performed the double back somersaults on this popular item called rope dance. And watching this, Hitler exclaimed, "The jumping devil of India." It is said, like, the stories goes on in Malabar in different directions. People say that Hitler checked the shoe soles of Kannan to make sure that he was actually performing it. Unlike Kannan, when I was doing research in the Indian office, I was actually looking at Indian office records in the British Library. I could find passports of many acrobats who crossed borders during this time. Probably not as famous as Kannan, but this flow was going on. And surprisingly, some of them at least, who crossed the borders were children. In fact, I conclude my book chapter, my book actually with these children of a lesser god. In 1959, the King Paul magazine, published with the Circus Friends Association from Britain, asked, "Who are these girls? Where do they get their training?" The answer to the question we have already seen. Most of these girls come from Kerala and they got trained in the circus galleries. Children have always played prominently in the history of physical training and culture in the circuses. Items such as high wire, boneless, seesaw acrobat, bamboo pole, and china plate are almost exclusively performed by child performers. This is because circus acrobatics demand an absolute balancing of the body, and a child's body could master the skill easier and better. The circus trainers, like most of the Kalaripayatty practitioners, believe that a child's body could be molded easily, and a child's body is more supple and flexible. A strict diet and strenuous training are a fundamental part of any circus acrobatics training. But however, on 18th April 2011, the Indian state banned the employment and performance of children and adolescents below 18 in Indian circuses. Most of our socio-legal discourses are centered on the binary of cruelty and emancipation. The employment of children in the circuses naturally open up some key aspects and questions regarding body, performance, dignity, livelihood, global economy, caste, and racism. I'm just trying to go to the slide. Next slide. Okay. I mean, in this context, we'll also have to ask uncomfortable questions, not only about the trendy discourse of child trafficking, but also about fuzzy borders in the face of livelihood and survival. During my fieldwork, many of the circus artists have narrated to me their ill-treated childhoods where they had to undergo beatings and starvings as part of their training. Sexual abuse was also not uncommon. There are also cases of fatal accidents. But we must also bear in mind here that these conditions lay bare the inequalities and violence of a world outside the tents. John Irving succinctly puts in his beautiful novel, The Son of the Circus, let me quote him, "The Indian circuses reflect an atavistic and compassionate life. Who are most of these acrobats? They are children, mostly girls. For many of them, the alternative to this life would have been begging or starving or prostitution. And what is the circus life for them? It is 3 performances a day, every day, to bed about midnight and up about 6, unquote." Circus has also definitely provided an alternate space and livelihood for many children, especially from the subaltern communities around the subcontinent. My 4th chapter, Circus Workers and Trade Unions, looks at the labor struggles in the circus. Circus has always figured in the common sense as a place of exploitation with dangerous working conditions, wretched living conditions, miserable wages, irregular working hours, physical and mental harassments, and insecure employment in life. But strangely, if you look at the history of trade unions in India, we would hardly find a circus workers union. This chapter examines the Akhil Bharat Circus Karmachari Sangh, organized under the tutelage of Communist Party in the 1960s, which succeeded to an extent to establish a workers' circus, owned, worked, and managed by workers. Can I have slide 6? Actually, the slide 6 is a photograph of this company's inauguration. This is actually the circus company that's being inaugurated by V.R. Krishnaiah. Can we go back? Actually, slide 6. This is slide 7. Okay. So yeah. This company was inaugurated by V.R. Krishnaiah. Okay. Who was the Minister of Law and Social Justice. in the first ministry headed by EMS Namboodiripad in 1957. He was also one of the leading advocates of Talasheri town. So it's actually interesting to note that when I met V.R. Krishnaiah, he did not remember the inauguration of this Akhil Bharat Circus, while for many of the circus personals, it's a valuable memory. The second section of this chapter actually discusses the emergence of the only existing circus workers union now in India, the Indian Circus Employees Union, under the tutelage of Indian National Congress. So let aside the human performers, I have a chapter on the animal performers. On 2nd March 1991, the Environment Ministry of the Government of India issued an order based on the 1960 Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, banning the training and performance of some animals, bears, monkeys, panthers, and dogs. And in a corrigendum dated 7th August 1991, the ban on dogs was withdrawn. In less than 3 weeks, the Delhi High Court granted a stay on this order on a petition filed by the Indian Circus Federation, and the animals continued in the ring. 7 years later, in 1998, October, a new notification was issued substituting dogs with lions. Kerala High Court, banning these animals from Indian circuses, asked, let me quote, if humans are entitled to fundamental rights, why not animals? Unquote. Many of them died an untimely death, traveled long distances, some without food and water. Animals had to remain in cramped cages for several months. They were deprived of sex, since these animals were not considered as wild. They were considered as hybrid, neither African nor Asian. They were taken away from Indian circuses and placed in the 5 zoos around the country. And this was the condition that they were undergoing after the rehabilitation. However, this ban was fateful in the lives of thousands of circus artists and workers around the country in such a way that it became a significant memory in the collective memory of the circus community. This is a significant moment. This ban forms as a significant moment. Almost 40,000 animal trainers, caretakers, handlers, and performers who were part of the Indian circus industry for more than 150 years lost their occupation. And neither the government nor the circus owners gave any kind of compensation to these animal trainers, and nor were they rehabilitated along with their animals. But the real irony is the fact that Indian state did not even think about a ban on the elephants. A ban on elephants would not have been easier, since elephants were associated with powerful institutions with traditional and religious aura, such as the Temple Management Trust, Devasum Board. The ban directly affected a marginalized group of people like the circus community or the snake charmers on the road, but hardly affected other dominant spaces, such as the religious spaces or the traditional animal fighting sport, Jallikattu. The most ironical fact is that these exhibitions are not even considered as animals in performance. What makes certain performances legitimate and certain others illegitimate is a triggering question. Another significant point to remember in this context seems to be that many of these global NGOs those who propagate humanity for animals and the rights of children have often their roots in the West. We need to think through the global web of non-governmental capital, post-colonial states, and policy production in the global South. Slide 7. In a recent paper that I gave for the Soyas London University, I in fact speak about the bonded lives of humans and animals in the circus. This is Damu Dhotre and Sonia. Damu Dhotre has a wonderful autobiography, The Wild Animal Man, and he has dedicated it to Sonia. He says, Sonia, the most beautiful of them all. In fact, a section of my chapter talks about animal trainers and the human-animal relationship in the circus, the intimate bonding and the complexity of that relationship. It's actually significant since this intimacy this relationship has not been talked about at all, neither by the state bodies who banned the circus animals, nor by the petitioners who raised the issue of the livelihood of animal trainers and keepers. Slide 8. The very structure of circus is embedded with the idea of temporariness, of constant movement, and the most obvious symbol being the tents. Circus tents must be one of the largest tents used for habitation and exhibition. The configuration of tents defines the space in which circus is lived and performed, distinctly marking the hierarchy and power within. These tents obviously have amazing tales of lives and technologies to tell. But when circus in India has hardly been documented and historicized, there's no need to specifically say that the tales of the tent are yet to be told. Kandambuli Balan's Circus, published in 1961, probably the earliest and definitely the most comprehensive book on circus in Malayalam, notes that to experience the real wonders of the circus, one should see the numerous activities which do not figure in the program book: tending, dismantling, and transporting, and hands without an audience and applause. He provides an account to put across the magnitude of this operation. And he compares it with a major military maneuver. Let me quote from him. In just 42 hours, an iron fence with a 2,000-foot diameter and the canvas city within it shall be dismantled, transported to a destination 100 miles away and reset. And add to this 150 animals, including 20 elephants, 500 people, and 1,000-ton equipments. As soon as the last show ends, the tent master deploys the 200 expert staff under him and 100 temporary local laborers. While one group would fold the 4,000 chairs, another would disassemble the makeshift gallery for 2,000 spectators. Gates, electrical equipments, fences, decorations, gallery, halls, and small tents are attended to by some others. 50 trucks would be ready by then to load these. The last one to fold is a big tent, which is 50 feet high and 2,000 meter canvas spread over 6 large iron poles. Only tent master and some trustworthy assistants would handle it. The steel ropes would be carefully loosened and the tent will come undone like a gigantic parachute. The next morning, the school kids would stand looking at that empty ground with their mouths agape. Unquote. Let me read this section from the 10th tragedy from my chapter called Tending the Circus, and maybe try to wind up this talk. This would actually give us a clue as to how objects can direct, shape, downplay, or lead the lives of humans and animals and other objects associated with it. Kerlapatan had spent the prime part of his life stitching tents and lifting poles in the circus. Kerlapatan had built a tent with a whopping capacity of 12,000 for Kamala Circus. Kamala Circus is supposedly the second largest circus in Asia. It had 3 rings. His skills impressed the legendary Professor Damodaran, the owner of Kamala Circus, so much so that Kerlapatan was sent to China to learn the Chinese style of cutting tents. In 1955, K.S. Menon, the owner of Bharat Circus, had come to Delhi for the Indian Circus Federation's meeting of the circus owners. He desperately needed Kerlapatan's services and requested Professor Damodaran for him. Bharat Circus had 4 new canvases perfectly stitched, but needed waterproofing. It was a tough task that required the master because the waterproofing work had to be done before sunrise. Kerlapatan took up the challenging assignment. In the wee hours, he began his work, melting hot wax into perfection. While pouring the hot wax into the fuel with utmost care, he must have had no idea what destiny had in store for him. Kerlapatan was busy working on the canvas. Accidents and mishaps were not unfamiliar to him. He had lost a leg under the train engine of Kamala Circus. But that day at Bharat Circus was irreparably tragic. A fire broke out and spread all of a sudden, burning Kerlapatan to death, along with his most beloved item, the tents. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak in the history department, and for having me here. I really want to thank history department for whatever it has stood for me as a doctoral student, and also for being there in this journey towards this book. I've also met some of the genuine scholars here, amongst whom I would personally like to thank late Dr. Bishamoy Padi, Professor Mahesh Rangarajan, and Professor Dilip Menon, who were supervisors of this work at its various stages. I once again dedicate this book to my late mother, whom I lost in 2015, and my partner, Sanjeev, and my dear circus friends. My gratitude to them is beyond words. Thank you so much. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, Nisha. That was a wonderful talk, and I look forward to reading the book. I think we'll take questions now. You can hear me clearly, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So some people, I think, have already put some questions in the message box, and I'll read out some of those questions as well. And I think if there are other questions from Facebook and elsewhere, yeah, sure, Charu. What I'll do is a student volunteer can put it in the box, and I'll read those out as well. All right, so we can go on till about 8:30. Okay, since we have so many questions, Nisha, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but let me just, I mean, this is such rich material, so I have lots of questions to ask. Okay, so let me just begin by asking, about, on the one hand, this is an intensely local history, right? It's the history of the circus in this particular region, in Malabar. It draws from these physical traditions in the area. You talk about the labor that's required to set up these tents that are again drawn from the area, etc., etc. So in some senses, this is a very local history. And you also then talk about how the history of the circus allows you to think about the transnational and about, think about history in these connected ways. So I know we didn't have time perhaps to talk about that now, but what would be really interesting is to really hear more about this question of how, ideas and personnel and practices actually travel, right? Because and how do we think about the local and the transnational in linked and connected ways? So that's one thing I wanted to ask you. Another question I had was the relationship between the circus and other forms of itinerant entertainment, both modern and pre-modern, right? Whether it's traveling theatre, dance, etc. And again, whether you have whether there are overlaps, whether there's borrowing in terms of personnel, in terms of training, etc. And obviously, this would be, again connected to question one about sort of movement and between periods and between spaces. And again, I was wondering, for instance, did these circuses in the Malabar region, did they only have performers from Kerala, from the region, or did they actually draw on people from elsewhere, right? Whether which is, it would be interesting to know. I just bring up two more points. One thing that you haven't talked about is the funding for these circuses and how they were organized. Where were the salaries of these circus performers coming from, and what was the relationship between different kinds of performers? For instance, I'm sure you have the organizers, the ringmasters, etc., and you have and there are different varieties of performers. You have the acrobats, you have the people with the animals, etc. And are there internal hierarchies? Were they paid differently? Where did the money for the training, for all of these things, where did that come from? So really, these questions about funding, salaries, etc., is something that I wanted to ask. The final question, I wanted to push you a little bit about this point about child performers, right? And you were talking about how you want to sort of discuss them or talk about them in a way that goes beyond these binaries of cruelty and emancipation, and that this is a particular kind of livelihood. That you mentioned, you quote someone who says that if these girls had not been performing in the circus, they would have been prostitutes, etc. But that, so what is that? How would you define this space, right? If you don't want to use these binaries, how do you sort of historically and conceptually talk about these spaces? Because this point about these two being binaries could be, you could say that of any kind of child labor, for instance, right? Whether you're working in a restaurant or in the circus, there are ways in which this is about livelihood. There are moments which are not emancipatory, but allow certain kinds of freedoms, and then there are moments which are deeply exploitative, right? So would you sort of talk about the circus as an exceptional space, or are we making a point about child labor in general? Could you sort of elaborate on this point, right? So I'll just stop with that because there are so many questions. Okay. Do you want to respond to me first, or should I read out some more questions before we continue?
I think I can respond.
Sure.
Yeah. So It's
Ma'am, your voice is echoing.
My voice?
No, ma'am, Nisha ma'am's.
okay. Do you think I should? Okay, let me.
Nisha,
Now it's fine. Now it's fine. Now it's fine, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah. So your question regarding regional and transnational histories, in fact, Aparna, the current work that I'm doing with Yale University, it actually looks at the transnational history of the transnational history of the circus in the context of America and Europe. And I've also in South Africa, I was more or less looking at the contemporary movement of African acrobats to Indian circuses. The major questions that I was trying to ask in my book was the human animal performers, the history of objects and ideologies in the circuses. But a circus is not a even though some of the performers might be coming from some of the acrobats might be coming from Malabar. It also has a international characteristics with people coming from around the world, from almost all parts of India. In the work that I've been trying to do with these universities in South Africa was to look at the African performers. There are these circus schools in East Africa, many parts of East Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, Ethiopia, where many of these artists were coming from, just like the Malabar circus galleries I was mentioning. This is actually the transnational aspect of the circus was not something I probably could have done in this book. I wanted to do it as a postdoctoral research, and that's what I'm doing at the moment. The major story that I was trying to put forth was to speak about human performers, animals, and the history of objects, and to write more or less a history of the circus that is based on regions, I would say. But this work that I'm trying to pursue right now, it is actually a transnational history kind of a work. The work in South Africa is actually an Indian Ocean history kind of work, where it connects the southern part of India to East Africa, and it has a long history that goes back to many thousand years. So, along with while speaking about the circus galleries actually mostly trained Malabar acrobats. If we are speaking about Kileri Kunjikanan Teachers Gallery, it's mostly we are speaking about early 20th century. So even having Malabar acrobats of different castes and different genders itself was a kind of a resistance of that era. When it comes to later on, the galleries established by his disciples like Mandan Teacher's gallery was more or less a family enterprise where he trained his children and his few friends. It was not a very elaborate circus gallery, but the only existing gallery by M.K. Raman, it actually had children and people from all kinds of backgrounds, and people actually joined the gallery in a large number. And in fact, a section of my chapter describes a section. It has a section called Adda, where I speak about the relationship of these disciples, these acrobats who are coming for training, their relationship with the trainer, where how they exchanged and how this relationship was maintained. It was hierarchical, but at the same time, there was also that space where the senior artists who would be working in various circus companies across India would come back and give sort of gifts and dakshina to the trainer, and they would also help each other to join in other circus companies. And the trainer himself, in fact, Kileri, it is said that while M.K. Raman was a student in circus, in Kileri's circus gallery, he was approached by many circuses to get M.K. Raman as the acrobat. If you are a famous acrobat in the circus gallery, people get to know about it. And if you're specialized in a certain kind of an item, people get to know about it, and they might want you in the circus company. And there were people in different. There were acrobats who went to Maratha companies, Bengali companies. There were all kinds of artists. And your question regarding the child performers. See, when the Supreme Court of India banned child performers below 18 years in Indian circuses in 2011, they conducted campaigns online in front of the circuses, the Bachpan Bachao Andolan, which was actually headed by the Nobel Prize winning Kailash Satyarthi. This NGO actually conducted campaigns in front of circuses, and they did online campaigns as well to take away, to rescue these circuses. What happened with these child performers who have been rescued from the circuses is notable. Most of them were taken away from these circuses, and government didn't have much of a plan to where to sort of keep these children. They were actually, the parents from India could take them away. I mean, could take them to their houses, but in the circuses, it's not that always. You might be coming from a family where your parents will come and take you. I mean, they probably must be children who may not be having that kind of parents, or who might be able to take you away and give you a sort of good life back home. Or you may not be. I mean, I've met children who do not even know their own caste because they are mostly orphans. And these children were placed with some of the NGOs. Bachpan Bachao Andolan had some of the children, Childline had some of the children, and some of these children were also Nepali children. They were actually from Nepal. And what happened with them is very interesting. These Nepali children were sent back to Nepal. And now in Nepal also, it's almost the same scenario. I went to Nepal and met some of those children in Kathmandu who have actually organized a circus. The German NGO, Estabenim Trust, actually organized a circus called Circus Kathmandu with these children who have been rescued from Indian circuses, and they have been performing there. I actually went to Kathmandu and met some of these children and I could interview them. And the wonderful thing is, you're taking away from Indian circuses, saying that, They have been undergoing exploitation and they have been undergoing abuses. And then you are the rehabilitation is happening in another circus only in Nepal, and it's the German NGO that's doing it. It's definitely the question of domestication comes up. And what happened with some of these children in Indian circuses is that many of them did not have a house to go back to, and most of them ended up being with the NGOs and their protection homes. Almost is the same case that happened with the animals. I've already been talking about the 1991 ban, where these 5 types of animals were rescued from the Indian circuses, and they were rehabilitated. I would always use that in quote, rehabilitated in the 5 zoos around the country. Half of them died an untimely death. Many of them, even the small baby ones, had to travel long distances, and they were put in cramped cages. And none of them were rehabilitated. And some of the circus owners were even complaining that they didn't even reach the zoo. Probably they were sold in the black market. Almost the same case that happened in Mexico. In Mexico, they banned because of the animal rights campaigns and the animal rights movement. They also banned animals in the circuses in Mexico. Most of them didn't. They were again rehabilitated in the zoos, and most of them didn't even. Mexico has a very active animal black market, and many of them were actually sold in the black market. So my question is, the very idea of conservation itself is problematic sometimes, and it needs to be. It is the legality, the law, and state itself becomes Janus-based in the case of circuses. So I think. I think that was what I was trying to.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much for that response. I'm just going to take a few questions. I'm going to read out a few questions from the message box. I'll start with a few. We have quite a few, and I'll just start with a few. Hina has a large number of questions, so I'm just going to read out 1 or 2 from her and then go on to other people, and maybe we can come back to her questions at the end. So I'll begin. So maybe I'll read out a couple and then get back to you, and then you can respond.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So Hina is asking, criminal tribes had a history of performing acrobats, rope walking, etc. Nomadic and Banjara communities were also performers. Does all this have any relation with circus history? So that's one question she has. Another one is that whether the World Wars had any role to play in the history of the Indian circus. I'm just... Jinish has a question. Could you please reflect on women's participation, specifically from Talacheri, in the circus in the pre-independence period? And I'll just read out one more. Abdul Razak has a question about when exactly clowns began to appear on circus in circuses. So maybe you can answer these, and then I'll read out some more.
Okay. Yeah. So let me. The women's participate. Let me begin with the women's participation in Malabar. Actually, that's where I also started my research. When I was a MPhil student with Kannur University in Talacheri, North Malabar. The first time, this is how I reached this research. In fact, I used to reach my campus a bit early. And some of those sweeper women with whom I used to have a chat, where one of them was a circus artist. Later on, I could find that she lost her job, and it is actually I met her afterwards. Like, you know, I could meet her outside the university and learn that she lost her job because she didn't have much of an education. She had gone to the university. She had gone to the school for only 2 or 3 years, while the university stipulated that university sweepers should have 8th standard education. So she told me that some of these women who were in the who joined the circuses across India, usually they do not have much of an education. Most of their schooling is only limited to 3-4 years, as they join the circuses at a very early age, mostly as children. So I actually began interviewing other women in the circus in the circuses through Anita, this person whom I met in the university, and through her, I could learn that there are hundreds and thousands of people who were in my hometown and the areas around it, who were going to the circuses in the better part of the 20th century. And most of them were women. And I actually began interviewing these women artists and wrote an autobiographical narrative of the circus women. That's how I actually reached this research. This is I wrote an article in Malayalam, in Pachakudra, in and out of dilemmas. The autobiographical narratives of circus women from Talasheri. They actually, even though I learned that some of these women did not have any education, for any formal education, most of them could handle like 6 to 8 languages, Indian languages, and some of them could even speak Arabic or English, as some of them have even spent a few years outside India, along with the circus companies they were working with. Yeah, I mean, it's true. Actually, women. It's actually my first attempt was to write a history of the circus through these women. But then later on, I realized that it's the history of the circus itself is absent and needed research. So yeah, Banjaras and other communities. Actually, if you look at the archival sources, state archival sources, or the official archives, you can actually find a lot of jugglers, animal trainers. You can find these communities, acrobats who were traveling, who were roaming around the circuses, or like you can either find them in a railway train or at your doorstep. My concern was more or less to write the history of the circus as a form. Even though they might appear, the circuses might appear as nomadic, even though they have a nomadic existence, I'm not really sure if they can be called nomads in the sense of North Indian Nottangis or the Banjaras. The travel plans that the circus groups actually make are really well planned. They plan it with a map in front of them and pre-plan it according to the availability of the ground, also other things like they have to seek permission from different grounds and different administrative officials. So they actually plan it that way. I mean, unlike probably the Banjaras or the nomadic group of people. Yes, the clowns. I mean, the clowns. If we look at the history of circus, we can understand that circus is a modern form that came from outside. It came with colonialism. It's a modern form. There are different tales associated with the origin of circus. I don't want to discuss those, but some of them goes on to say that some of the fabulous chronologies written by the authors of the circus, authors of circus histories, talk about how, or rather they trace it back, the history of the circus is traced back to Roman hippodromes, to British circuses, to sort of us kind of narrative. So it's the clown performances were actually there in European and American circuses much earlier than it came to India. Of course, we have some great movies on the clown performers, and yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'll read out some questions from Karthik Panigrehi, and Charu also has a few questions. So Karthik says, given the itinerant nature of the circus, did they incorporate elements of local culture in their repertoires, say Kathakali-inspired performances? What happened to these local performers then? Did they also travel with the circus? And if so, can we treat the circus as a nature of inter-transmission of cultures between regions, which you've sort of addressed already? Charu is asking, I was wondering why Malabar and in particular Talacheri is so important to this, to the study of the circus. Why was it so central to the development of the circus in India? Why has there been such a dominance of Malayalis in it? And she's also asked about the strong gender dimension of the circus. The kind of work done by women is so central to the circus. Again, this is something that you've talked about. But she's asked specifically about questions of marriage and sexual relationships which emerge in these spaces. And Karthik has another question about popular depictions of the circus in movies like Mera Naam Joker. So perhaps you'd like to comment on these. And
yes. Okay. Popular narrations on the cinema. Okay. So let me address Charu's questions. Yeah, I mean, why Talacheri? I mean, Talacheri, it is said like, those who've already written, which I was mentioning in my last responses, those have written on the history of the circus, they say that the Hippodrome Circus, the William Chidney, an Italian circus, came to perform in the Talacheri town, and Kileri Kunyakannan teacher, who saw the performance, was moved by the acrobatic performances, and he takes up the challenge and tries to organize and a circus Kalari, but again, why circus Kalari instead of a circus? It has what I would say is like why Thalassery. Thalassery has a big history in Kalaripayattu. Kalaripayattu has been one of the most influential. It's a variety of Kalari. That circus Kalari is a variety of Kalari with, it actually. Which substituted the Payat Kalari. The Payat Kalari has been substituted as or remodeled as Circus Kalari by Kileri Kunikaran teacher. Kalaripayattu has been one of the most influential physical culture that contributed to the structure of circus acrobatics. And Thalassery and Malabar especially has a long history of Kalaripayattu. That could be one of the reasons why Thalassery and also Kileri Kunikaran teacher who first initiated the circus Kalari, I already mentioned. He actually used all the elementary exercises. If you look at the circus acrobatics, Walachil, Tirichil, Odiram, almost all of them, all the elementary exercises are from the Kalaripayattu. Kileri was actually an expert of many physical cultures. He was not just a person well versed in Kalaripayattu. He was a gymnastic teacher in the BEMP school in Thalassery. He was also had traveled to various other parts of southern India to learn various physical cultures like Uttu, many other Kusti. Many other physical cultures, well versed in those physical cultures. What he did was he actually converted this circus Kalari into, he converted this Payat Kalari into a circus Kalari as to fit in this modern form. And most of the acrobats who came to the circus Kalaris were people from the backward community, like Thea, Mukua. Again, Thea, a community. Again, if you look at the traditional occupation, it's the taddy tapping. It requires a kind of a physical exercise to be able to do the taddy tapping. To be able to you really require that kind of a physical fitness and physical. It's a physical thing. It has a close affinity towards physical. In the fisherman community as well. I could actually find that most of the fisherman community in Thalassery, the same was the case with some of the Kenyan artists I interviewed in Mombasa. Most of them were fishermen from the fisherman community. Again, the physical sort of thing must contributed to the physical nature of circus. The gender dimensions, I think I already spoke about it. Yeah, the marriage and sexual relationship. I don't know what exactly your question is, Charu. Is it you want to know about the marriage and marriage relationships, how marriages are conducted? Is that what your question is? I'm just trying to answer that way. The marriages usually, you can see many people in the circuses are married across caste, regional boundaries, or unlike many of the people who would marry within their caste or within their region, within the linguistic, whatever. You can actually see in the circuses that people intermarriages are taking place, and also since it's also a small version of the nation itself, like I met this small family. Girl, and they are. She's still in the Indian circus in the Indian circuses. I mean, it's sort of easier there probably to intermarriages are very. The cinema. Yes, Merana and Joe, the family tent, which would be next to the girls' tent, the company girls' tent, and the ring boys' tents as well, like which would be, which again talk about the hierarchical labor hierarchy in the circus, and there are also, yeah. So.
Nisha, let me just read. We're running out of time, so I'm going to skip over a few questions because you've answered some of these, but we have some very interesting comments that have come via Facebook. So I'm just going to read those out to you. And so Astha Gandhi has asked whether the history of the circus can be looked at without analyzing how that history is encoded into the performances and how the history of the performing body has evolved in the circus. How do you locate the performative codes which have evolved over time and created new gendered and social identities within those performative codes of
circus performances are what are the elementary structures that contributed to the circus performances? There are a lot of things I haven't done in this book, I should admit. Writing a book is also a choice between 100 other books to be written. Or, I could have written 100 other books maybe, working on the circus history. But I chose to write this book because, I am looking at certain key moments, major moments in the history of the circus. There are a lot of things I could have done. People actually usually ask, what is the... I began my work through asking questions of how women entered the circus. I could have written the history of... the first proposal that I gave to the Center for Culture and Society was...
Razi, I think you need to mute your mic because it's echoing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the proposal was actually on the history on the history of women in the circus. I could have actually pursued the history of the circus through women and written a history of the circus. Instead, I chose to write the history of the circus through the history department instead of writing it through women. I think I have mentioned it. I couldn't actually understand Trisha's question. Can you once again tell me what exactly she was asking?
She's asking about the disabled and non-conforming bodies. In European circuses, you have these freak shows, etc. Or you had, how did they stand to the relation of the? Does the history of the Indian circus have a history of these kinds of elements?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question.
Yeah,
actually, if you look at the history of American or European or Australian circuses, you can actually see that these were, especially the American circuses, where different bodies were exhibited in enhancing their spectacular visibility. I could actually find some of these some of them, like for example, you already know that how the small people, the little people, perform in the circuses. They have a history of in the circus, a strong history in the circus. There were the people. I mean, many circus owners have told me that most of them approach directly to be able to live in the circuses, have an occupation, and have a sort of a professional life in the circus, where otherwise probably outside the circus probably it's a different life. And they also performed. They actually performed complex items like the bar. The bar actually needs it's a very complex item which needs strenuous training and strenuous effort, and takes so many years to master the item. And there were these particular small bars which were designed for the little people, the small people who would perform it. And trapezes, they perform on the trapeze as well. And some other acrobatic items were also performed by these people. Complex acrobatic items were also performed by these little people in the early 20th century circuses. I could also find these in the Malayalam newspapers. Some of early 20th century, like people with this different body, like unlike the kind of people with different bodies were actually approached. I mean, there was a news piece actually which I could find in the Malayalam newspaper where the circus company approaches this person with a certain kind of different ability, I should say. I mean, physically challenged person to perform in the circuses. Another interesting news piece I could find is about a parakeet with some kind of the kind of different body again was exhibited in one of the circuses in the otherwise I haven't come across so much of that enhancing of the spectacular visibility of different able bodies or the disabled bodies into the circuses. I mean, it's almost the same way, like in the American and Australian or European circuses, you can also see that African bodies were exhibited, like different ethnicities were also exhibited. Actually, you cannot see that the different kind of that kind of exhibition. Focused on the exhibition of different bodies. I think Indian circus does not have that much of a history. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Razi, should we be wrapping up now? We're kind of running out of time, or should I?
Yes, I think Nisha has responded very patiently to so many questions. And repetitive.
Thank you, Nisha. That was wonderful. That was wonderful. And we really look forward to hearing more about your work as it evolves and grows. And don't take another 10 years to come back to speak to us.
So, I would love to.
Yes.
Anytime.
Yeah. And I believe one of our students has a vote of thanks. No? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
There must be somebody, yeah.
Yeah, just thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us. And as Aparna ma'am said, definitely we hope that we'll see you again soon, perhaps in person at the university, looking to better times ahead. Definitely. And thank you also to all the faculty and students who've joined us. Next week at the same time, we'll be having Professor